Good afternoon. So then, data is not information. Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not understanding. Understanding is not wisdom. Author and astronomer Clifford Stoll. And education isn't how much you have committed to memory or even how much you know. It's being able to differentiate between what you know and what you don't. French writer and Nobel Prize winner Anatole France. I decided to hit you with a doubleheader today. A, to give you two sides of a perspective, because those quotes come from two different places. And B, to make up for the fact that I didn't have one last time. I felt it was appropriate. So, this is what I call the math conspiracy. Dun dun dun! Alright, but no, seriously, I know that sounds ridiculous in its ominousness. Tongue twister there. But let me get into it. I'll explain. So, as we all know, if the government can't be trusted, that means government-run schools cannot be trusted. So, how are schools fucking us? Well, it's the first line of your indoctrination process after your own parents. So the purpose of school is to forge a person's mind to best serve the system and not to divert from the programming. So, how do you program free will? Well, you can't. You have to trick the person into making the choice you want them to make. Just like putting a rat in a maze. The rat doesn't know there is a way out of the maze. They just assume they need to make it to the next meal. It never occurred to them that maybe they should learn how to use the maze to get themselves out of the maze. Instead, they just react to the maze and get to the cheese at the other end. So, how does this apply to public education? In all my other videos, I stress to you critical thinking skills and problem solving for a reason. To force you to perceive information objectively. This is the key, objectivism. Yes, this is me telling you something that I think is the answer. It's one of the few things that I believe wholeheartedly is concrete. And to even say I believe it is wrong, because I just know it. And it's something that I only ask you to try, to take a leap of faith, and if it fails you, to reject it. Sometimes there is something to faith, and that usually has to do with your first time doing something. What is life without risk? It's not life in any way, shape, or form. It's okay that there are unknowns out there. It's not okay to never solve the mystery of those unknowns. So, the key is objectivism. School gives you a subjective lesson plan. You were given a history book, and like the information of the Bible, you take it on faith that it is right. When you express any doubt in the sense it makes, you are mocked by the teachers and peers as a way of keeping us in a mental prison. I mentioned perceiving information earlier. So what is information? In its most basic form, it's data, right? By the way, I usually write these before I find the quotes. So the quote by Stoll in the beginning was quite appropriate, which is the reason why I chose it specifically. Data is a concrete form of a concept. A concept is a group of ideas. An idea's value is based on the values of the individual perceiving it. The question is, how do we know we got it right? How do we know it's real? If I said 2 plus 2 equals 4, how do you know? How do you know it? Answer that question to yourself, then answer this question. Do you know what 2 is? Literally, like, what is the definition of 2? Now, 2 plus 2 equals 4 is correct, but if you don't know the right answer to why it is correct, then you are not using your own mind to know the truth. You just assume it. When you think about it, it's very much the thought process of Pythagoras. And Pythagoras was in a cult. So I'm not asking you to be in a Pythagorean cult. I'm just asking you to find that one truth as of value. So, 2 is the product of a concept and another concept exactly like it, such as 2 cars, 2 chromosomes, 2 fingers. To express that there is another single concept present, you simply say 2. You know, you don't say, oh, I have 1 finger and 1 finger. You say, I have 2 fingers. Because why would you want to speak out your entire concept of, I have this finger and that finger? 1 and 1. It's 2. You just say 2. And that's how it works. Unless you don't know how to count to 2. You just say, I have 1 and I have 1. It's insane. So that's why we do that. So, for instance, if you see 2 red cars and 2 blue cars, you can say there are 4 cars total, because red car is a concept, blue car is a concept, and they're already in sets of 2. 4 cars altogether is true also, because you've gone into the larger concept of cars as opposed to the smaller concept of cars of a specific color. And that is why when you look at concepts through that demonstration, that you know for certain that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Those numbers are meant to be replaced with anything else, and that's how you're supposed to use that. It's a way that you frame the left hemisphere of your brain, the way your structured thinking works, and that is perfectly acceptable to build the structure of your brain, but it needs to be the right information. And it also means that you do not neglect the right hemisphere of your brain, which is what this society's problem is that it's too much of the too much of the left side of the brain, too much of rigid thinking. It's also not to be in a quote-unquote sexual context. It is the male side of the brain too, in that respect. So it's also, we're not supposed to have these thought processes separated. And there's even ancient religious texts that talk about the gods separating creation of man, of God's children, and separating them from their other halves, or some other thing. You got to look into it, but I'm going off on a huge tangent that has nothing to do with this conspiracy. So, my point is, now imagine an education system that has failed to explain math that way to you. How would you view the world you are trying to understand? It would be like reneging on the Renaissance. Eventually you would lose the ability to grasp the concepts of basic mechanics and physics or biology. You know, that is the difference between a successful education and a failed one. That's the real difference. But we sadly don't judge our school systems on how well we grasp concepts and can forge new ones. We base it on our tests, our testing system. Tests are designed to see if the student has accepted the program. The test is mandatory to gain the recognition of those who have the power to give you money for your labor. School is there to prepare you for the maze, to prepare you for the proverbial rat race. That's why they call it the rat race. It's just another metaphor for the Matrix or Plato's cave. This continues into college as well. Ever take a history class and try and bring up things you have heard about the pyramids from a conspiracy site that made sense to you, and then everyone looks at you like you're nuts. Even though, yeah, but scientifically it's proven that when the pyramids were built, they had to have been built this long ago, and etc. You can go through all the rational logic that you figured out on your own, but then all of a sudden you bring that in there, and you're crazy Uncle Jack. You know what I mean? It doesn't work. They will end up. They'll end up saying you are nuts. The slaves built the pyramids. Just like the Hebrew people who were slaves, and they had to fight for their freedom. Thus, they're throwing a little bit of that guilt in there. Guilt is a very powerful form of mind control, especially when it's fraudulent guilt. To make you feel bad about something that you have absolutely no responsibility for. You are not responsible for the suffering of other people that you yourself did not have a direct hand in. And unless if they think you had a direct hand in it, then they need to make that real to you. But you would need to also be smart enough to know whether they're telling the truth or not. Because we always have to look at the faults in ourselves. But that being said, let's face reality. If we're talking specifically about how some of the ancient Egyptians in the dynastic period treated their slaves that they actually had at that point, that has nothing to do with you. Has jack shit. Other than the fact that you might be indoctrinated into part of that program, because we can get into another conspiracy about how ancient Egypt is an ongoing process in the modern day. But despite the fact that I was hinting at that, that's not what this is about. Once again, I'm going off on a tangent. Hi, people, I'm crazy. Anyway, it's funny how history books serve the story of the Bible pretty well, and comfort the minds that way for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. You could also look into atomism. I'm bringing up Egypt again just because I'm always questioning the official story of history, so that's always on my mind. Or atomism, which was the first god to be god of the gods, and claimed to predate the gods and create them. The whole absolute God that we understand as God in the monotheistic faiths, the big three. This is the core philosophy of monotheism. Why was that belief system harshly rejected in Egypt? These are all important questions that we have to ask, and that we can't just sit there and say, well, it says here on page 3 of our textbook, that's why. And it's just like, okay, interesting story. Let's find out if it's real. This stuff takes time and research, and some people just think that it's not important to do the time and research. They just need trust because they have to move on to bigger and better things. Hey, listen, I'm not asking everybody to be, a huge historian, but, at the very least, you can ask some basic questions and get some basic answers. And then if you really care that much, you can probe into it. But at least, if it's important information, go for it. Because it might be some of the most important information you'll ever know in your life to shaping the way to your personal happiness. So that's what you have to do. I'm not going to answer any of those questions for you, because I do have my theories and I do have my evidence that supports some very interesting theories at that. But I'm going to leave that for you and your ability to bridge concepts and know it for yourself. So, just want you to go out there and use your enlightenment well. Take care.